Before we get into the episode, we would like to issue a content warning.
Due to the nature of this show, we will be discussing sensitive topics, which could include murder, violence, sexual assault, domestic abuse, animal abuse, elder abuse, alcohol, drugs, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and more. Please take this into account when deciding when, where, and if to listen. Hello, and welcome to Looking for a Man in His 30s, a Criminal Minds podcast. I'm Emma.
And I'm Sara, and today we'll be discussing Season 1, Episode 14, Riding the Lightning, which premiered on January 25th, 2006.
So first, Sara, let's have a little chat. You have teased that you have a very interesting story for before we begin. So what the hell happened yesterday?
Well, Emma, I went to a gym yesterday. For the first time in forever.
Oh my god, that's cool.
So, how it started was my best friend messaged me about a week and a half ago. So, we really need to join the gym. And I was like, yeah, we do, because we're just getting lazy. We're not doing anything. Plus, we've got chronic illnesses, so getting out and walking every day is not feasible because of pain issues and yada yada. Anyway, so we found this women's only gym that just recently, I think, opened earlier in the year, but it's in the area I grew up in. So we found out there's like a taster session for like £10. So we thought, right, well, we'll go and try it out. If we like it, then we can consider like signing up for like a monthly basis payment thing. So we went yesterday, and oh my god, it's amazing. It's so quiet.
That's brilliant.
It's so quiet. It's just peaceful. There's not many people there. Load of machines, load of equipment. I think we spent about an hour there. And fun fact, it's in the mill that my grandma and auntie used to work in many moons ago.
Oh, that is really cool. And it's good that you've got someone to go with, because it kind of sucks. Well, I put my headphones on and ignore people anyway, but I do struggle with motivation to leave the house to get to my gym. And my gym's like a 10-minute walk. What machines did you use?
Well, we went on the treadmill first, not for running because I can't run to save my life. So we just like walking on the treadmill. And we went on the bikes, went on the cross trainer, went on the rowing machine, did some weights.
Oh, that's good.
Tried everything.
Dumbbells or?
Yeah, dumbbells was like it was really fun.
So I have not been up to much this week. Oh wait, no, Sara, big news.
What?
I actually posted the first episode of the podcast on Monday.
Yay!
I did it really early Monday morning because I thought, right, okay, we're launching Monday. I'll just set it up. I'll set it up to go live at just gone midnight. And then it took me about 2 hours to actually manage to upload it to our RSS feed and our YouTube. And that wasn't necessarily the fault of either of those apps. It was that I hadn't done it before, and so it was just taking a long time. Okay, we'll be back with the episode recap after this short break.
Welcome back, and now we're on to Emma with the episode recap. So Emma, wheels up.
Wheels up. So we start off with Gideon at a classical music concert, and for a brief second I completely forget the way this episode is going to go. And I think that he's about to get a loud phone call to interrupt the performance. And he's going to have to be like, oh, sorry, I've got to go solve the murder. Bye. And I was like, oh, you'd just be like, why am I always the person sitting next to the FBI agent who's got to go solve a murder? Look, I'm trying to listen to this nice music. Anyway, so it cuts back to him in a car with JJ and Morgan. They are discussing the case of Sarah Jean and Jacob Dawes, who have been sentenced to death for the abduction, rape, murder of multiple teenage girls and the murder of their son. It's coming up to the execution, and the team are heading to the prison before Sarah Jean and Jacob are executed to conduct death row interviews, which is apparently something the FBI does quite a lot. The idea is that they get information about how this crime was committed, to not only bring peace to the families who would want to know where their loved ones' remains are, but also to be able to train them to track killers better in the future, to hopefully avoid some deaths. So they're in Central Florida, and we learn that the body of a new victim has recently been uncovered, and the team want to know if this was actually their last victim. Cut to the other car, Elle, Hotch, Reed, and Garcia. Reed is saying there's not anything about the dynamics in this case file, and Elle is pointing out that most law enforcement do not care about profiles or relationship dynamics. All they want to know is, who did you kill? Where did you kill them? Right, you're guilty, goodbye. They only care about the cold, hard facts. And the cold, hard facts in this case are that Jacob and Sarah Jean were found guilty of murdering 12 young women, as well as their toddler son, Riley, although now there appears to be more bodies that are turning up. And poor Garcia, she wants everyone to know that visiting death row is not in her job description. And she does not want to be there. And I'll be honest, I don't see why she has to be. Like, are you telling me that in 2006, the FBI were unable to, like, have the agents at the FBI are unable to press record on a video camera in 2006? Because that's what they need to do. They need to conduct the interviews and record the interviews.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see why Garcia has to come all the way to Florida with them.
I think it was just an excuse to get her out of the office for this episode. Perhaps.
Gets her out of the office, but she's in basically the same set, surrounded by computer screens.
True.
So I do feel that this
scenery,
was
though. Change the scenery. Does good for the soul.
Oh. Yeah, most often when I think of a change of scenery in Florida, I'd think of, sitting by the side of a pool, not visiting death row. So yeah, I don't see why Garcia has to be there. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of technical stuff. But, oh God. So Reed and Garcia are in the back seat, and he just leans over to her like, Garcia, this will be the first serial killer couple ever recorded into VICAP. And I don't know why he thinks she'd be excited about that. Why that would somehow change her mind. Like, oh, really, Reed? Sorry, I didn't realise. She doesn't want to be there because she doesn't like getting involved with the actual, creepy, disturbing bits of the crime.
Yeah.
She'd much rather just do her magic searching.
Yeah.
And, she's never been like, oh, please tell me more about the evisceration. So Reed cannot read a room.
No.
Did you like that?
Beautiful.
And Garcia is like, they killed 13 young women with blonde hair. And yeah, I wouldn't feel safe about doing that either. I would, in fact, feel tempted to dye my hair, as if that is not a regular thing that I feel tempted to do. So come back to Morgan, Gideon, and JJ. Apparently the media dubbed Sarah Jean the Ice Queen in the trial because she seemed unbothered and unmoved. And it's here where we learn that Sarah Jean only confessed to the murder of Riley and not any of the teenage girls. But also, just as a side note, dubbing her the Ice Queen is very reminiscent of what we see a lot in female murderers, specifically those who are part of a killer couple.
Yeah.
The woman is judged more harshly by the public and the press because women committing crimes, especially heinous violent crimes, it's a double deviance. That's the sociological term for it. They are both deviant in committing the crime and in going against the typical feminine archetype of caring and gentle and empathetic.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I'm not saying here, hey, it sucks that female murderers are treated badly by the press. I'm saying it sucks that they are treated worse than the male murderers.
Yeah.
They're both murderers. It doesn't matter what gender they are. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that comes up with the Moors murderers and with Fred and Rose West.
Which we'll find out more about later.
Yes, and which I think I specifically said to Sarah, I cannot hear anything more about Fred fucking West.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, spoiler alert, he was the right person for this true crime.
Yeah. Don't worry, I've left out gory details because it'd be too much.
Yeah, that is good. A lot of people don't. So sometimes if you're like listening to a true crime podcast, and while you were on holiday, I did listen to a few while I was tidying my office.
Yeah.
And there are some details about the Fred and Rose West case that I'm not going to be able to get out of my brain if I took it out of my head and bleached it.
No.
Oh. Back to the episode. We learn that Sarah Jean has refused to comply with any previous interviews, and Morgan rightly points out if she doesn't talk now, she's going to take her secrets with her to Old Sparky, which he says just as you get a close-up of the electric chair. I'm not like thrilled about cutesy names for deaf implements.
Yeah.
Like, go on, Morgan. Tell me your cutesy name for the lethal injection.
Can I just say here?
Okay.
The electric chair. I will be forever traumatized by the film The Green Mile.
Oh yeah. Me too. Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
As part of mine and Sarah's reviews of other media, The Green Mile is a great movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely beautiful movie, but
scarring as hell.
Yes, I have a clear memory of me. I think I was age 10. I think maybe younger, maybe older. Watching it by myself, and I was bawling with tears at the end. Yeah, and it was either on a video or a DVD or something. But I was watching it on my own.
Yeah,
and I was bawling, crying at the end, absolutely sobbing.
Definitely.
And not many films make me cry, but that one does every time. Every time I watch it.
Yeah, back to the episode. Sarah Jean is being led down the corridor by the prison warden, and I presume just a prison officer who we don't get to know at all. The warden is telling Sarah Jean that for the next 36 hours she'll have a guard stationed outside her cell, her personal effects will be brought to her, and she will stay in this cell until her execution time. She will also receive a last meal, which is not to exceed $20. And I know this is unimportant compared with actually losing your life, but I do have to say, have they changed it now? Because I feel like $20 would barely buy you a personal pizza.
Yeah, I'd imagine these days it'd be worth more because of inflation.
Yeah.
I'd say back then you could get a decent amount of food for $20.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, no. And you do see later on that Sarah Jean's got a giant, like, meal, burger, chips, onion rings, etc. But Sarah Jean doesn't care about her personal effects or getting that $20 meal. She just wants to know that as there's a full moon tonight, can she go outside and look up at it? She just wants to have some time going outside and looking up at the moon. And the warden says no. And I'm guessing that's because there's an escape risk. But at the same time, this is like a maximum security prison. And you could have her handcuffed and shackled. I don't see how much of a flight risk you think she'd be. It just seems a bit mean. Like, it's not like she's got unhinged people outside the prison waiting to break her out. Speaking of unhinged people, the BAU have finally arrived at Florida State Penitentiary, and there are regrettably a lot of people outside who are saying how they love and support Jacob, and there are numerous women who have dyed their hair blonde to look like his victims, and honestly, that's the creepiest thing I've ever fucking heard.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
I just want to know if they've told the people in their lives. Oh my God, if I told my mum that I was going to a prison where there was a serial killer who was about to be executed for murdering young women, and I was going to go stand outside with a placard like I'm meeting freaking Harry Styles, she would absolutely hit me straight in the face, and she would be right to. I just want the people listening to this to imagine telling their parents that they're going to stand outside a prison and pledge their love and support for a serial killer. Yeah. Just imagine telling your parents that. So now the team thankfully find this as disturbing as I do, and actually point out that they're one short, which is sort of funny and sort of disturbing, because they have found another body, making the total 13 young women. Now we have Jacob being led into the interview room in his prison jumpsuit, and he's just got a fucking smile on his face. And it's so creepy. And it's like he's deriving an almost sexual thrill from, ooh, I can tell you how many women I've killed. But I'm also going to keep some back. And that's how I get my rocks off. Oh my God.
His eyes are just like, bleh.
His entire face, it is, I mean, there's no secret anymore. His entire face is just pure Fred West. So we get to the first of Jason Gideon's bookend quotes. And the first one is Genesis 9:6. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. Which kind of flies in the face of an eye for an eye, which is also in the Bible, but I'm not a biblical scholar. And I'm also like, so I don't believe the death penalty works as an effective deterrent. It also costs more to keep someone on death row than to keep them in prison for their whole lives. I am also worried about the possibility of executing an innocent person, because I don't know if you heard about this story, Sarah. It was a few months ago. But so this man had been in prison since the 1980s for the murder of a newsagent, and he was exonerated in the past couple of years because of DNA evidence. They tested the DNA. It wasn't him. He wasn't at the scene. And then they were like, okay, so here's some compensation, which is right, because he spent 30 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And then the prison held some of that money back, saying, oh, this, so we have deducted room and board from your payout. And it's like, room and fucking board? Are you kidding me? Sorry, that man's entire life is destroyed. Yeah. He's lost his job, potentially even his pension. Mm. He's lost basically every relationship he has, because if someone I knew was then put in prison for murder, I don't think I would continue that relationship.
Yeah.
And yes, and they were like, we're going to deduct room and board. And honestly, at that point, I'd have been like, actually, I think that man gets one free murder, and it's whoever made that decision on the fucking financial compensation board.
Very strange.
Yeah. So I don't think the death penalty is an effective deterrent. And also, I think people should just have to sit in prison for the rest of their lives and think that, oh, I've done this thing and now they're keeping me in prison and I can't see people whenever I like. I can't get up or do what I like with my life. I am stuck in here for the rest of my life because I committed these crimes.
Yeah.
I think, that is an effective punishment. We're not going to rehabilitate serial killers.
No.
But I do think they should have to stay in prison for the rest of their miserable lives. Slowly losing everyone they had around them until they are literally just in a cell by themselves, going insane because no one wants to talk to them because they're evil. But I'm not going to cry over Jacob going to the electric chair because, oh my goodness, if I was one of those agents, I'd have probably just batted him myself. I'll be honest. So, cut to the prison. The BAU team are making themselves at home and have just put up a 35-hour remaining timer. Garcia is setting up 700 computers. And I'm like, you don't need to do that to just click record on a camera.
Slight exaggeration there, I'm not doing it.
Morgan is recapping the case for us. A number of missing girls in northern Florida in 1985. There was an anonymous tip from a woman that Jacob was the last person seen with at least one of these girls, which led to police interviewing him at home while Sarah Jean and Riley were with him. The caller is never identified, but keep that in your mind. We're coming back to that. 3 hours after police initially interview Jacob, they come back with a search warrant because, of course they did. He's not exactly flying under the radar. He's not one of those people that you'd be like, oh yeah, I never would have thought it about him. He seems so normal. You're like, if you were told that man is a serial killer, you'd be like, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
So they come back 3 hours later with a search warrant, and at this point, Riley is missing. But the police don't have time to focus on that because as they searched the property, they found the remains of 12 missing girls buried under Jacob's workshop. Reed tells us that Jacob feared the police were onto him, and so he ordered Sarah Jean to kill Riley so the toddler wouldn't slow them down. And I just want to be very clear here. So there's 3 hours between the police coming to interview him at first and then saying, hey, we're going to come back with a search warrant. There's 3 hours. So I just want to know how they didn't have time to leave. Like, if the police came to my house and I was like, well, I have the bodies of 12 women buried underneath my house, I think they're on to me. I would just run at that point.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, there's this 3 hour period. Sarah Jean has killed Riley and disposed of the body, and Jacob didn't have time to pack a fucking bag? Didn't have time to, pack his, most important things in a bag, throw it in the car. And I think this is where we find out that the only thing that Jacob could possibly have in common with our dads is that he would also not be able to pack a bag within 3 hours, even if it was the difference between staying out of prison and facing the death penalty.
Yeah. I can do it in 10 minutes. Even a massive suitcase, I can pack it in 10 minutes.
Yeah, honestly, I don't seek to give any advice to murderers or criminals on the run. But if I thought the police were after me, I would be able to drag a suitcase out of the loft and help just upend drawers into, like, just literally pull out my drawer of band t-shirts, upend it into the suitcase.
Yeah. Done.
I would be like, right, well, I obviously know where all of my most important documents are, and, you know, where I have spare cash, right, upend into the suitcase in the car. I would be 2 hours away by the time the police came back with that search warrant. So I'm just saying, this really shows a lack of competence. You know, it's not like I am one to call criminals, like, dumb or anything. But I do think they're fucking dumb. So anyway, we find out that Sarah Jean only ever confessed to killing Riley and never once confessed to any role in the crimes against the teenage girls, although, as it is pointed out, she never actually denied it, and Jacob was the one who said, yeah, she lured the teenage girls for me and then took an active role in the crimes. We learn that Jacob is a sexual psychopath who has shown no remorse or guilt over his crimes and wants to essentially own his victims, which includes not revealing where the suspected remaining bodies are buried. Sarah Jean, however, according to the prison psychologist, her demeanor is more like that of a war victim. And, you know, I might have looked into this at some point in the 20 years that she's been in prison and on death row, but once you've got a confession, why bother making sure it's accurate? Send someone to the electric chair. So there's a guy in the room where the FBI is setting up, and at this point he kind of pipes up and says, hey, did they actually agree to do these interviews? And wild thing if the FBI just went, right, well, they haven't agreed to the interviews, but let's send an entire team of agents, plus for some reason Garcia, down to Florida just on the off chance. Yeah. And then they're like, the FBI's like, well, actually, they not only agreed to, they requested it. And then you find out that this guy isn't just someone from the prison who was responsible for, like, hey, here's your setup space, do you want any coffee? He's actually the Dawes' appeals lawyer, Sam Shapiro. And I'm just confused as to why the appeals lawyer for Jacob and Sarah Jean does not know that his death row clients have agreed to speak to the FBI before their executions. I mean, I hate to say this about him because we don't learn anything else about him, and so he seems like fine, but
yeah, great though. So,
like, because if you're their appeals lawyer, surely you're like, oh, hey, well, if they speak to the FBI and they give more information, we might be able to delay their execution. Oh, maybe we could even get a pardon. I just want to know if he's good at his job, because I feel like he's not. He even comes right out and says, well, I can't get them a stay of execution. But it seems like nobody cares what he thinks or what he says, because Gideon has moved right on talking to Garcia and is telling her, okay, 75% of communication is nonverbal, so I'm going to need you apparently to watch their body language. And it's like, I don't see why you're telling Garcia this. She's not trained in profiling or in body language. She is literally a computer hacker. So, again, I don't know why you brought her. Gideon gives the rest of the team some tasks. He sends Morgan and Elle to Sarah Jean and Jacob's house, which is due for demolition, and Hotch is going to interview Jacob. So at the Dawes house, Morgan and Elle are talking about how Jacob alleges that Sarah Jean would lure the teenage girls from mall parking lots by kind of offering them weed and saying, hey, come back to my house, we can smoke weed. And then she would take them into Jacob's workshop where they would find him, but no weed. So Elle actually studied the case at the FBI Academy, and she fills in some of the blanks for us. Jacob would use his workshop as a torture chamber, using the typical tools that you would find in a workshop or a shed or a garage to inflict pain and torture on his victims. He would then use a bench saw to dismember the bodies. Now, I hate to say this, but we do get a nice transition shot here where, because the workshop has been torn down so that they could excavate the remains underneath, but Elle and Morgan are imagining the workshop as it was at the time, so it goes up around them, even to the point where Morgan gets to point out the arch that Jacob made in the workshop.
That is a good scene.
Yeah. Even when Morgan crouches down to touch the floor, the workshop floor actually spreads underneath his hand as he runs it over the grass. Absolutely brilliant part of editing and just a great scene building. I just wish it wasn't about Jacob fucking Dawes.
Yeah.
And I wish that I wouldn't keep having flashbacks to Fred West.
No.
So Morgan tells us that Jacob was abused as a child, but they don't know anything about Sarah Jean because her mother refused to give any evidence in her daughter's defense. And I'll be quite honest with you, I would find it hard to provide extenuating factors if my daughter was arrested for killing my grandson and helping her husband abduct many teenage girls who he then killed and buried, mostly under his workshop. But the kicker here that we find out in a few minutes is that he actually buried one of the teenage girls under the extension that he built for his mother-in-law. And at that point, if I was her, I would also be drinking in the middle of the day and saying, fry the bastard. So we learn that later on, but I do feel that's important here. And Morgan and Elle are off to see Sarah Jean's mother in case they can convince her now to say anything. Back at the prison, Gideon and Reed are accompanying the warden to Sarah Jean's cell. Apparently, she hasn't talked to anyone in all of the time that she's been imprisoned. The warden explains that they have to keep Sarah Jean separated for her own safety because people who kill children are not treated very well by other inmates in prison.
I wonder why.
Which is unsurprising. Yeah. And also, I don't have a lot of sympathy. I do think the prison is obliged legally to keep them safe from harm, but I do also think that, I'm sorry, you did kill a child. No one cares if other people are mean to you. Sarah Jean's personal effects have arrived. It's mainly a number of paintings that we learned she's been doing since she came into the prison. One of the ones that is brought to her features a young boy running across the sand. Gideon tells her that the paintings are good, and they are. And frankly, I'm just happy she's not selling them like some other notorious inmates. The guy who shot Reagan, John Hinckley Jr., he sold some of his paintings. I believe he was still inside prison when he was doing it. Yeah. So Sarah Jean is asking Gideon what he wants to know, and Gideon's telling her that the parents of those teenage girls deserve to know their daughter's final resting space. Cut back to Morgan and Elle, who are approaching a house that frankly looks like it was ripped apart by the crime scene techs, and that's probably because it was. They're at Sarah Jean's mother's house, and someone has graffitied "Rotten Hell, Sarah Jean" on some plywood plywood that's holding up the front of the house. I don't know much about construction.
Yeah.
The mother comes to the door after a while, and she is not best pleased to see the FBI here. She says, "My daughter and her son of a bitch husband buried a 13-year-old under my floor. What more do you want from me?" And honestly, yeah, I feel that. If someone had killed a child and buried it under my house, I'd want them dead too. And I would also prefer that absolutely no one ever contacted me about the incident ever again. They explain that Sarah Jean is talking to the other profilers and that they just want to get background information on her. The mother is not happy about it, but she does let them in. And the house is even more of a shambles on the inside, where there is literally crime scene tape up on part of the like, it looks like it's just wood sticking up from the floor, so I don't know if they're like, okay, this is where we're going to dig a hole to find the child buried underneath here. If there's still crime scene tape up, is that still a crime scene? Should she be living there? I just don't know if that might have been the first thing I took down when I was allowed back in. But anyway, it looks like the house is literally falling apart. And I don't actually think she should be living there at all. I think that it might, at this point, be a structural hazard. Morgan tries to make some small talk with this woman, saying it appears like Jacob liked arches. And I'm like, Morgan, this woman is not willing to make small talk with you about the architectural designs in her fucking house.
Yeah.
She cuts right to the chase and says, yeah, teenage girls was what he liked, and then takes a swig of what I assume is very strong whiskey. Elle tries to get information about Sarah Jean's childhood, but the mother is not having it. She says Sarah Jean, before she met Jacob, was shy, quiet, but perfectly normal. Morgan tries to ask about Sarah Jean's dad, and this touches a nerve as the mother tries to defend her husband for being so strict, but she's definitely covering something. She's definitely covering something.
Yeah.
Morgan presses because they need to know more and prevent it happening again. Elle says to the mother, hey, can you tell me about how your husband disciplined Sarah Jean? And the mother lets slip that the father was an abusive piece of shit, but he only hurt her and not Sarah Jean. And then Morgan asks the stupidest question ever by saying, why didn't you just leave? As if domestic abuse victims are not at the most risk of being killed when they try and leave their abuser. You are literally an FBI profiler, Morgan. Why do you not know this? And let's not forget that this is 2005. Sarah Jean looks like she's in her early 40s, which puts her kind of childhood around the mid to late 1960s.
Yeah.
Maybe even into the 70s. And for those of you who do not know, let's give a short refresher on what life was like for women in the 1960s in America, but also to varying degrees all over the fucking world.
Yeah.
So the pill doesn't come in until the end of the decade, and abortion is not legal across the entire country until 1972.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Roe v. Wade.
Yep.
Which means that women, by and large, struggle to control the amount of children that they have, particularly to abusive men who aren't exactly taking their opinions on whether or not to have sex or whether or not to have a baby into any situation. In addition, no-fault divorces are also not a thing that comes in until the end of the decade, maybe even the early 70s. I know it was 1969 in the UK, which means that women are trapped in marriages because proving assault or domestic violence would be ridiculously hard, even if the police took domestic violence seriously, which we know they did not in the 1960s. Basically, it was considered a sort of personal thing that the police didn't get involved in. Most women in the 1960s did not work outside the home and could not open credit cards in their own name, let alone get a place to live.
Yeah.
They were financially trapped in marriages with abusers. And leaving an abusive husband meant potentially losing everything you had, including any financial security and perhaps even the custody of your own children. So, sorry, Morgan, what was it you were saying about why Sarah Jean's mother didn't leave her abusive husband? Please tell us more. I'd really like to hear. No? Nothing? All right. Okay, Morgan, thanks. And luckily, Sarah Jean's mother is having none of this shit. And she's like, we had nowhere to go. And I would have added, you fucking idiot, to this. Morgan asks if the mother was the anonymous caller who tipped off the police about Jacob's involvement. And she says no, but she knows who did it. She does not reveal that to Morgan or Al, and instead gives them a letter saying it came this morning. It's a statement of innocence. But who would send that to her? Cut back to the prison, and Sarah Jean is amazed that Reed was able to become a doctor so young and says his mother must be very proud. But before Reed can answer, Jacob is going past the interrogation room and throws himself at the metal barrier to scream at Sarah Jean that their names will live on forever and some other insufferable fucking shit.
I was going to say keyboard.
Yeah, I know. He's screaming at her as guards drag him away, but Sarah Jean says nothing to him. She doesn't even react. But she does accuse Gideon of designing that to happen because he wanted to see her reaction. Now we're cutting to Jacob's interview. And it won't surprise you to learn he's not exactly cooperating. He wants to do a magic trick.
Ooh.
Pick a card, any card. But Hotch is not here to play games.
Yeah.
He's here to find out where the missing bodies of teenage girls are. He says that Jacob is a psychopath, and Jacob corrects him, saying sexual psychopath. Like he's actually, like as in how I would correct people that I got a first in my degree.
Yeah.
It seems like it's something he's weirdly proud of. Like, no, sexual psychopath.
Like, what was Hodge going to do? And go, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know, like, oh, sorry, my lord. Hotch doesn't fucking care what you think, Jacob. He's not like, oh, wow, no, I've made the multiple child murderer slightly upset. Hotch is asking Jacob flat out how many girls he killed. And Jacob is like, do you ever smile? I'll answer this. No. Especially not when talking to people that have murdered multiple teenagers. I cannot express to you, Jacob, but I don't think anyone is smiling when they talk to you. And if no one is smiling when they talk to you, I think it's your fucking problem. No one is like, oh yeah, Jacob, he killed like 12 teenagers, but he's good for a laugh, isn't he? And shitbag Jacob tries to say that you can't trust a guy who never smiles, which is rich coming from a serial killer. Hotch, however, is not rising to the bait whatsoever, and is just like, are there any more bodies? Jacob, as we learned earlier, is possessive over the locations of the remains of his murder victims, so he says he wouldn't get anything out of telling the police where the rest of the bodies are buried. And I think Hotch tries to appeal to Jacob's humanity by saying it would give the families closure. But honestly, I can't imagine why anyone thinks Jacob cares about that. He's shown no remorse. He's a sexual psychopath. He's actually reveling in the fact that families and law enforcement agents are unable to get closure on the cases of these missing girls. I don't know that there's humanity there to appeal to, Hotch. So anyway, Jacob and Hotch have reached an impasse. Jacob wants to do a card trick, and Hotch wants to find out if there are any more victims. I don't actually know what the middle ground is here, so I don't think they'll be able to reach a compromise. Thankfully, we cut away to Sarah Jean's interview, and she explains that Jacob represented freedom to her, at least when they first got together, and Reed queries freedom from what? But my guess is that it's probably the abusive home life that she was suffering. But we never get confirmation on that. Garcia patches through Elle, who is at Sarah Jean's mother's house, and reading out the Declaration of Innocence that Sarah Jean had sent to her mother. And Gideon is reciting it word for word after Elle, which is riling up Sarah Jean to the point where she runs across the room and rips the headphone out of Gideon's ear. At this point, Reed picks up exactly where Gideon has left off, and Sarah Jean lunges across the interview room to grab the headphone from his ear and has to be held back by Gideon and steered into a chair. And Sarah Jean is not happy that anyone else has seen that letter. Gideon tries to calm her down by saying that she's not responsible for the deaths if she didn't kill them, so why didn't she use that as a defense in court? And Reed points out that even if she knew some of Jacob's crimes, that's a long way from knowing that he killed those teenage girls. And Gideon is at this point like, I think you're innocent and you're about to be executed. But she is not having it, and cut to Garcia's proto office, where even defense lawyer Shapiro is saying, I can't get a stay of execution, which is not exactly what you want from a defense attorney. Mm. So I am slightly confused about his job. So if Sarah Jean has been like, I will confess to murdering Riley, I want to have the death penalty, then why does she have an appeals lawyer? Mm. Because she can plead guilty and then refuse a lawyer. Why would she be appealing it? Why is Shapiro there? Does the state just provide lawyers even if someone says, no, I'm guilty, please give me the death penalty? I'm just confused because I'm pretty sure she has the right to refuse a lawyer. Reed tells us that human sexuality is biological, physiological, and emotional, and Jacob's sexuality is informed by the abuse he suffered as a child at the hands of his mother. Because he was an only child, he would have been alone at the time of the abuse, which would mean that he would have to be alone with his victims to derive pleasure off of it. And even they cite the ongoing interview between Jacob and Hotch, where Jacob says, if I tell you where the bodies are buried, what does that leave for me? He uses a singular pronoun, not the plural pronoun we, which is what he would use if Sarah Jean was there. So they can only deduce that if Sarah Jean had been present at the murders, tortures, or even the abductions, it would have ruined the thrill for Jacob. So she must not have had anything to do with what happened to these teenage girls. Shapiro says that Sarah Jean confessed to Riley's murder, but Reed says that they're actually convinced she was the anonymous caller who tipped off the police to get Jacob under suspicion and arrested. And Gideon says that if you're full of remorse after finding out what your husband has done, and you are ringing the police to turn him in and writing a letter to your mum saying that you're innocent, what kind of person would do all that and then turn around and kill their own toddler? So there's now 30 hours to go. The team just have to prove that Jacob killed Riley so that Sarah Jean gets a stay of execution. And oh God, we're outside again with the mob selling. They've got signs which say Sarah Jean rot in hell, but also, hey, Jacob, fuck me, I look like your victims. It doesn't actually say that, but I'm giving you the Cliff's Notes.
Yeah.
It definitely says that. And I think there are some anti-death penalty people in the crowd who've got like signs up saying all life is sacred, which, okay, fine. And then I suppose they have people there who are like, actually, we think child murderers should be killed. And this isn't the time for me to get into the pros and cons of capital punishment. But I do want to say the women who are out there being like, hey, Jacob, look, I look like your victim. I think those people are disgusting, and I wish that they would not be there. And if you're thinking, wow, I hope that's as bad as it gets, no. Someone leaked to the media that the BAU team are potentially considering a stay of execution, which is not ideal to have reported on the news, especially about such a high-profile crime. So the team are not sure that Hotch is actually going to be able to get anything out of Jacob. And do you remember what Garcia said earlier about Jacob liking young blonde women? Enter JJ. So Hotch is entering the interrogation room with Jacob, who, for some reason, is being allowed to smoke a cigarette. And he does make this very tired joke about, I know, someday these are going to kill me. Shut up. You're not allowed to make jokes. I'm pretty sure that you were not allowed to smoke in federal buildings in 2005. So I want to know why he's allowed to smoke in a federal building during an interrogation with the FBI about the multiple murders he's committed. And Sarah Jean isn't allowed to go outside to look up at the moon. Jacob is telling a stupid joke that no one cares about. Hotch is literally not giving an inch, and he's just like, anyway, moving on about the women you've killed and not about your stupid jokes. And then JJ comes in, and suddenly Jacob is just so interested in the interview. He's literally leaning forward. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. And so JJ comes in and she says, my friends call me JJ. And Jacob is like, well, hello, JJ. He's literally like a cartoon, his eyes bulging out of his head. You can almost hear Awooga going off in the background. And thankfully, she shuts him the fuck down as soon as possible by saying, you're not my friend. You can call me Jennifer. Oh. And I just really love it when women take terrible men down a peg or two. That's my love language. Seeing strong, capable women just utterly destroying idiotic, terrible men. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. So Gideon has gone back to speak to Sarah Jean, and she's really apologetic about breaking his headphones. And much like Jacob, she's focused on the fact that Gideon doesn't smile much. And I don't know how to break it to you, but I also wouldn't smile very much if I was going to death row and interviewing serial killers. Why would you want them to smile? They're not exactly doing a nice sunshine job. It's not a laugh riot. It's not exactly a day at Disneyland. What are they supposed to do? Hey, how are you? Yeah, great. Anyway, yeah, no, we'll do a card trick. Yeah, that sounds great. Tell you what, while we're doing this card trick, do you want to tell me about the girls you've murdered? Like, that's not exactly the kind of tone that I like. Gideon never wanted to take a compliment about how nice his smile is. He's noticed that the prison guards have brought in the paintings from Sarah Jean's original cell, and she is not happy to talk about them. But Gideon is not going to let anything lie, and he takes the paintings, places them in a sort of order, and tries to piece out the symbolism between them. And he's like, okay, so Riley in this photo, in this painting, he must be about 10, and he's running free. And this painting has a bunch of 12 roses, one for every girl Jacob killed, except now we know that there was a 13th girl and her body was only just uncovered, which means that Sarah Jean did not know about this murder when she did the painting. Why would Jacob involve her in 12 murders and cut her out of number 13? Unfortunately, we're back to Jacob again. And I had paused the episode at this point to make some notes, and so my notes here are, oh my god, what a horrible thing. It's just focused on his shit-eating grin, and I just want to punch him in the face. But I can't afford a new computer, so we'll continue. Jacob is falling over JJ, which I can understand. I do also see how JJ looks. But he's gone back to the magic trick. Hey, Hotch, tell you what, you pick a card. If you win, I'll tell you where one of the girls is buried. And if I win, I get to smell JJ's hair. Hotch obviously says no to this because that's creepy as fuck.
Yeah.
And JJ is like, oh no, it's okay. Thank God we're back to Gideon and Sarah Jean. He's asking why she lied about killing Riley, and she dodges the question by asking Gideon if he has kids. We know that he does. He's just not on fantastic terms with Stephen. Gideon is trying to get back to Riley, and oh, for fuck's sake, we're back to Jacob again. Jacob wants to complain about how he hasn't been able to play poker in a while because no one would play with him. Oh, I've only played solitaire. You're a child murderer, dude. I'm sorry people don't want to play cards with you. Boo fucking who. Thankfully, we're back to Sarah Jean and Gideon. Gideon is asking how old Riley would be now, and Sarah Jean asks if the pressures of the job affects Gideon's marriage, and he dodges that question to ask Sarah Jean another question about Jacob. And I hate to say that this is now becoming a new impasse. Now, Gideon does relent and starts giving Sarah Jean some information about Stephen. He's 25. I have a photo of him in my office. I don't carry one in my wallet. And Sarah Jean kind of assumes that must be a way to protect Stephen in some way, because Gideon is leaving him somewhere safe. Gideon asks if Sarah Jean killed Riley to protect him from Jacob, and she says that she protects her son as Gideon protects his. Gideon tries to press Sarah Jean for a burial location for Riley, but she will not tell him. She just says that Riley is safe, he's in a better place. And regrettably, the interview is cut short when a chaplain comes in to see Sarah Jean, presumably to administer last rites. And now we're fucking back to Jacob again, for fuck's sake. I've never seen a man before that I would want to shove a deck of cards right down his fucking throat. So anyway, they're playing poker. Hotch apparently lays dead man's hand. 2 aces, 2 eights. Jacob then lays down his cards and says, well, I've won. I get to smell JJ's hair and I'm not going to tell you where a woman is buried. And Hotch is like, actually, I had another card up my sleeve, and reveals that he has a full house. And at this point, I'm like, oh, thank God. Jacob is going to lose his fucking shit and start throwing things. And I'll be like, this is cathartic, seeing him really fucking lose it because he's lost. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't go screaming and crying about losing the poker hand, but I'm not far off, because as soon as Hotch has put his hand up to his ear and heard, in quotation marks, that Sarah Jean is receiving a pardon from the governor, or at least a stay of execution, oh boy, does that upset Jacob, and he starts to scream. It's wonderful to see this man distressed.
Yeah.
I will not apologize for it.
No.
So Hotch and JJ are just about to leave the room, and then Hotch tells Jacob Sarah Jean never killed Riley, and then Jacob is like, yes, she did. I can tell you where the body is. Which, whoa! So cut to Morgan and Elle. They're standing at a rather more expensive house than they've been at before because they've got a giant pool and a gazebo by the pool. Now, unfortunately, the value of this house is going to plummet significantly because there's a tech using ground penetrating radar to find the body buried under the gazebo. So apparently this is a house where Jake was doing some contracting work to build the gazebo. And right, so I want you to picture this, Sarah.
Yeah.
He's doing contracting work, building this gazebo. He's perhaps maybe laid the foundations, or not even laid the foundation. Maybe he's just dug it out.
Yeah.
The police come to see him, and they're like, okay, we'll come back with a search warrant in 3 hours. Now, for some reason, the police don't leave someone at the house while they go for a search warrant, because I would leave someone right outside in case they tried to run. But I'm not a law enforcement official, so what do I know? Right. So he's like, okay, the police are coming back with a search warrant. We need to kill our toddler son and get moving. We need to run. He'll only slow us down.
Yeah.
So Sarah Jean kills Riley, and then instead of just leaving Riley's body there, Jacob takes Riley's body, goes to the house where he's already doing contracting work, and either smuggles Riley through to the back, or the people aren't there, because I can't imagine they wouldn't ask if he just turned up with a dead child and was like, hi, I'm here to do the rest of the contracting work. I'm thinking, how the hell does anyone believe him that this is Riley? And now, again, I don't want to offer any advice to criminals who might be looking to kill their child so that they can then escape for different murder convictions. But if you feel that you need to flee and the child is just going to slow you down, he's a toddler. He can't tell anyone anything anyway. Yeah. Even if you had explained in detail to him your crimes, he would not be able to be like, yes, so eviscerated.
Yeah.
He's, again, not even 2 years old. Yeah. You know what you could do? If you think the police are coming, we best flee, the child will slow us down. Leave the child in your house. The police are coming back with a search warrant. They'll kick the door in and find him. He's not going to be able to inform on you.
No.
Hell, leave him at a hospital, a daycare, a fire station. They don't ask questions. No. Well, I suppose a daycare would. I know that my general feeling is that serial killers are actual fucking idiots. And if they were smart, they would do something useful with their lives. But I just want to point out that actually killing him and disposing of a body would take more time than it would to just be like, right, okay, TV's on, you watch the cartoons, bye forever. Would have been so much fucking easier. No wonder Jacob couldn't even fucking pack a bag to get ready to go in the time that Sarah Jean's like killed and disposed of this child. He's like, oh, sorry, I've got to finish doing this gazebo work. You know contractors and how they're real sticklers for sticking to the times and days that they've agreed. I mean, frankly, every single person I've ever hired to do work, even if they were on the run from the police, they would at least finish the job that they'd been paid for before going on the run. What I think we've deduced from this is that I would be better at fleeing from the cops than this supposed genius.
Yeah.
Back to the episode. They do find a body under the gazebo. It's 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. There are 8 hours left until the executions. There is still a crowd outside the jail. And I don't want to tell you guys how to spend your free time, but the woman's already being executed. You don't have to stand outside the prison with a sign saying "rot in hell." Like, she's about to go to the electric chair. I don't think she cares about your sign. She's not going to look out the window and be like, "Oh, it's sad that I had to read that." She can't even look out the window at the fucking moon. She's not going to be able to read your stupid sign. Anyway, turns out this wasn't Riley's body. Surprise, surprise. And in fact, it was another teenage girl. And Reed is wondering why Jacob would give up that location, because it goes against his need for power and control. But Gideon says, well, actually, Sarah Jean had nothing to do with the murders. So her being executed for Jacob's crime is the ultimate way to control her and will make her his final victim. So it turns out that the girl found under the gazebo, Ashley, Sarah Jean actually cleaned her parents' house, which is presumably how Ashley would have known Jacob by sight and how he could lure her into his plan to kidnap, torture, and murder her. Sarah Jean is sitting in her cell. She is having her last meal, which is some kind of burger joint kids meal because it comes with a toy. She is incredibly upset, genuinely, when they tell her that Jacob actually murdered Ashley and buried her under the gazebo in the house he was renovating. And from this, it's very clear that she did not know about him murdering Ashley, that she had basically no idea that even Ashley going missing could be linked to Jacob. Unfortunately, we're now back to Jacob. Thankfully, Hotch is there to be like, you lied to me, that's not Riley. And Jacob goes on, oh my god, he goes on a little gross spiel. Stay away from kids, man. Hotch tries to insist that Jacob tells him where the rest of the victims are while he still can. And Jacob's like, hey, I like you, man. I really do. But I actually need some alone time before I get executed. You know what it's like when your social battery dies. I've just got to go and relax by myself until I'm ready to be brought out for my execution. Like, all right, man, whatever. And also, it's like, what, you appear to keep like appealing to his humanity, but I don't think he has any.
No.
Like, I feel like you're wasting your time. It's very clear from this that Jacob is going to make sure that Sarah Jean dies with him. It's very clear that Gideon was right. This is the ultimate control. Because Morgan and Elle asked Sarah Jean's mother earlier, why didn't Jacob kill her? And this appears to be why. Because he could have the state murder her instead. Thankfully, we're back to Sarah Jean because, oh my god, if I had to talk about Jacob anymore, I'd scream. So Gideon is in her cell admiring the paintings, talking about the reeds in the river in one of them, where he spots a little wicker basket, which is hidden amongst the reeds. This is reminiscent of the Bible story of Moses, whose mother floated him down the river in a wicker basket rather than kill him. Gideon then points to the other painting where Riley is depicted as a 10-year-old. And I think he's implying that this is odd because why wouldn't Sarah Jean just remember him as a toddler? Unfortunately, Sarah Jean also wants time alone and she's asking Gideon to leave so that she can have some time to herself. And he doesn't really have that much of a choice, so he does. Cut to Garcia's temporary lair, and the clock has now reached 4 hours, 59 minutes remaining. Gideon bursts in, asking to look at the tape for his interview with Sarah Jean, where he quotes the Moses story that I told you earlier. And this comes with the big revelation that I think we all saw coming. Riley is still alive. Sarah Jean had 3 hours, and she wanted to make sure that her son survived and was not at all harmed in any way by who his fucking father was. 2 hours to go, and the prison team is setting up all they need for the electric chair. It's not a nice thing to watch, so I'll just brush over it. Garcia is checking over all hospital and police records dating back to 1990 to try and find a toddler abandoned in a firehouse or at a hospital or anything similar. Reed is also like, check newspaper listings in case she just left him on the street or in a park or something where, you know, some other mother found him. Shapiro is trying to get the governor on the phone, and Reed is saying Sarah Jean had to be local because she had to hand Riley off to someone else. She had a maximum of 3 hours between police visits, and it was during rush hour, which, like, okay, that's never the ideal time to dispose of a child and make a run for it. Although I do have this hilarious image of my mind of them trying to outrun the police and then running straight into a traffic jam with people heading home from the office. So the cops just kind of walk up alongside their car and knock on the window like, hi, you were trying to outrun us, but you might have been better off actually running. Yeah. Garcia is coming up empty with every single search, and Reed wants to know why Sarah Jean won't just tell them where Riley is. But Gideon says that Sarah Jean is protecting Riley from Jacob, which means they have no hope of her confirming that he is alive or where he is until she knows Jacob is dead. Reed speculates that maybe Sarah Jean doesn't even know, but Gideon says that she knows he's somewhere safe. So she didn't just leave him at a fire station or in a park with other parents around.
No, she left him with someone.
Yes. And Gideon cannot take no for an answer, so he storms back into her cell. Unfortunately, on the way, he goes past Jacob, who's having his head shaved, ready for the electric chair. And, you know, Jacob's just being like a shithead. And Gideon's like, I don't have time for you. I need to talk to the warden. Shut up. Which, you know, I always like. In fact, if someone could make a supercut of every time someone in this episode just told Jason to shut the fuck up because no one cared, I would love that. However, the warden tells Gideon there's no chance of him getting back into Sarah Jean's cell. It's too late in the game and the state just wants to be done with it. And I'm just going to speculate that might not be the best law enforcement strategy. Oh, well, it's too late now. We've already, warmed up the electric chair. What do you want to do? Well, I mean, if this woman hasn't actually killed anyone, I'd like her not to be killed by the state. Sorry, I know that's a radical opinion that innocent people should not be executed. But I know I'm going out on a limb here, but that is my policy, that I don't want innocent people executed. But hey, Gideon's going to give it the old college try, and finally, the warden has relented. He can have 5 minutes. So thankfully, the warden has agreed to allow Sarah Jean out of her cell so she can look up at the moon one last time. And it's a touching scene between the warden and Sarah Jean because he's even worried about her being cold, but she says, it makes me feel alive, which is, of course, a bit jarring because she is just about to be killed. And she's having this really nice moment with the warden, who she's really must have got to know over her time in the prison. She's asking him if he ever told his kids about the story of the man in the moon. And she's saying that she used to tell Riley that wherever they were, if they were looking up at the moon, they'd be looking up at the same night sky, which is really sweet. It cuts to her cell, which is being ransacked by Gideon. He's upending everything until he gets the idea to flip one of her paintings over, pry off the back, and find a very close-cropped picture from a newspaper of a young man about the age that Riley would be, playing a cello. And he takes the picture and runs off. I'm not sure if someone cleans up the cell before Sarah Jean gets back to it. But if I'd just been outside to look at the moon and I was like, this is a really nice moment. Thank you so much, Warden. And I got back and I just saw everything in my cell had been like turned upside down. I'd be like, you could have just asked. I'm in a prison. I'm about to be executed. I don't really have much incentive.
Yeah.
I don't really have much way to stop you.
No.
So the warden is telling Sarah Jean that it's time to go back in, but he's also saying, if you know something that can spare your life, you should tell us immediately. And she just refuses and says there's nothing that can be done. Back to the temporary headquarters, Garcia is comparing the last known picture of toddler Riley with the 17-year-old boy from the newspaper. The team think it's a fair match, and Hotch instructs JJ to release the teenage boy's photo to the local paper, circulating him as a missing person, and, for obvious reasons, not saying anything about his parents.
Yeah.
You know. Jacob is being moved to the execution chamber, and because he's an insufferable piece of shit, he's decided to yell out, Sarah Jean, I'll be waiting for you. No one cares, mate. Shut up. The warden asked Jacob if he'd like to speak to a minister to make his peace with God. And Jacob says, well, he reveals he actually has 18 victims because he says, I made my peace with God 18 times and each one of them was prettier than the last. Sorry. I wish he was not allowed to talk. Yeah. The warden orders the guards to take Jacob down, but he spins out of their reach with such speed and force that I am surprised he was not pinned to the ground immediately and tasered. Like, literally. Don't make sudden movements around people that have guns on their hips.
Yeah, you dumbass.
So anyway, he says, oh, I'm perfectly fine. I can make this walk by myself. And he marches off. It's just a bizarre thing to watch. He's just marching off, yelling to Sarah Jean that they'll be together forever. Oh my God, whoa, no one cares. So Jacob has confessed to killing 4 more girls, and Hotch is like, hello, we'd actually quite like to find their bodies and give peace to their families. And the warden's like, there's nothing I can do. Jacob will take that to his grave. At least he's being killed. All right. I think the parents of the 4 missing girls who have not been identified might feel differently.
Yeah.
But I guess, okay, Jacob's being killed. Good. So back to Sarah Jean. She's having her head shaved, ready for the execution, and she's holding the painting of Riley running through the fields. She's stroking it as her hair is cut off, and she can hear Jacob, but she's ignoring him because, you know, I would too. However, she turns the portrait over and then realizes that the picture is missing. Cut to Garcia's lair. Reed is saying the photo from the newspaper of the teenage Riley has been cut so closely you can't tell anything about the paper, like what date it was printed, what paper it is, was there a caption saying his name, and that's probably by design. The team speculate about whether or not Sarah Jean will give up Riley's current location once Jacob has died, but who knows? Hotch, not one to let a dramatic moment go to waste, stalks into the viewing chamber for the execution room with the picture of Riley in his hands and slams it up against the glass, telling Jacob Riley is alive. Riley, he's alive. You lose. And Jacob loses his fucking shit. shit, but it's too late. The hood is flipped down over his scowling face and the switch is flicked. So Gideon comes into Sarah Jean's cell to give her the picture of teenage Riley and tell her that Jacob is dead. He cannot hurt Riley anymore, and begs her to tell him where Riley is. But Sarah Jean is insistent. She is going to protect Riley until her dying day. So Gideon runs off telling her that he will find Riley before she is executed and tell Riley that his mother made such big sacrifices to protect him. So Garcia is looking for adoption records to try and trace any of the families that Sarah Jean cleaned for, because they believe she was only allowed to interact with her clients, which would mean that Riley was likely left with one of them. So narrowing down the list of the people who lived in the area where Sarah Jean was cleaning, they find that there is one family on the adoption waiting list and removed themselves in October 1990, 1 month after Riley went missing. All of a sudden, it's all systems go. Gideon is running to Sarah Jean. Morgan and Elle are being dispatched to find the Sheffields because Riley could save his mother's life. Luckily, we do get the comic relief of Morgan and Elle arguing about how long it will take to get there, and then Elle not bothering to wait until Morgan does his seatbelt up before she speeds off. It's a moment of light relief in this episode. Sarah Jean is being transferred to the execution chamber. Hotch and Gideon are there trying to convince the warden that they have found Riley, and the warden says that without an official message from the governor, he can't do anything. While Sarah Jean walks ahead to the execution chamber, telling Gideon, "My son is dead." Agents are rushing to Riley's house to get him. The governor is standing by, but Sarah Jean is telling him to accept the truth that Riley is gone. Sarah Jean is then remarkably honest with Gideon. She says she knows her son is safe to be whoever he wants to be, as opposed to the child of convicted serial killers and child rapists.
Yeah.
Gideon insists that Riley would not want his mother to die, but she says that the legacy she and Jacob would leave behind for Riley would be catastrophic and destroy his life. Sarah Jean implores Gideon to just let her die so that Riley never finds out who his parents really were. And she asks him to save Riley's life because hers ended the day she met Jacob. Morgan and Elle have arrived at the Sheffield house. They are banging on the door, but no one is there, and they are about to break in. Sarah Jean is just about to be taken through to the execution chamber as Gideon begs for just a few minutes more. At that very moment, a car pulls into the house, well, into the drive outside the Sheffield house. Pull into the house and then you've got a problem. Morgan and Elle approach Mr. Sheffield as he gets out of the car, telling his wife and son to stay in there. Morgan explains that they are FBI agents and they need to speak about his son. Elle rings Hotch and says, "We've got him. What are we supposed to do? Do we need to bring him straight down to the prison and have them conduct an immediate DNA test?" Hotch asks Gideon, but Sarah Jean is pleading with him not to let Riley be Jacob's last victim. So in that moment, Gideon hugs Sarah Jean and then gives the order that Morgan and Elle should stand down. The FBI are not going to break it to this boy that his parents are serial killers. And Mr. Sheffield thanks Morgan for this. Sarah Jean then asks if Gideon will sit in the viewing room of the execution chamber so that he can be the last face she sees. So it cuts to Gideon, seen in the audience, face to face with Sarah Jean. It's really quite an emotional moment, seeing Sarah Jean go to the execution chamber, knowing that she is innocent. And then we get a transition shot from Gideon in the audience at the execution to Gideon in the audience at Byron Sheffield's cello recital. And then we get Gideon's final bookend quote. Albert Pine said, "What we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others and the world remains and is immortal."
And thanks for that, Emma. And we'll be back with the episode discussion after this short break.
Okay, welcome back to Looking for a Man in His 30s, a Criminal Minds podcast. We are now on to the episode discussion. So, first interesting point is the title of the episode is actually a common slang term in relation to electric chair executions. So, riding the lightning. Ugh, disturbing.
So the other thing that I found was that the name of the group Metallica's 1994 song and album, Ride the Lightning, derives from the same term. But funnily enough, the song itself is actually an anti-death penalty song.
So, also, this is the... I mean, I did not double check this, but this is the first episode that we're seeing where we don't actually see a victim being abducted, tortured, or killed.
That is a good point.
Yeah, it's all just after the fact. And I don't think it's the only one in the entire season, the entire series, but it could be.
But so far, it's the first.
So far, it's the first. And I am always very grateful to not see young women being abducted and killed.
Yeah. Also, another point I've just remembered now. We don't see the BAU headquarters in this one.
And they also don't do Wheels Up, which is surprising because they were going from Virginia to Florida.
I was deprived my jets.
I know, Sarah.
Moving swiftly on. So, for notable guest stars, so the ones that I pointed out were... So the character of Sarah Jean was played by a woman called Janetta Arnett, and she's most notable for her role as Miss Mira in the sitcom Head of the Class, which I've never seen.
I think it was in the 80s.
Possibly before
I think the only reason I've heard about it is I'm pretty sure Dan Schneider was in that, and when people were talking about Quiet on Set, I think that's when I heard about it.
Like, her face does look familiar. I think I have seen her somewhere, but I cannot remember where I've seen her.
Oh, no.
And then for the character of Jacob, he's played by Michael Massey. He's guest starred in many TV series, including CSI, Law and Order, SVU, Cold Case, Supernatural. But funnily enough, in all these shows that he's guest starred in, he plays villains.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. I think he must, maybe he's getting typecast, but I think he's really good at playing villains.
Yeah.
Because throughout the entire show,
yeah,
all I wanted to do was literally throw my drink at him. So he's clearly very talented at this.
And there's the way he makes his face as well. He's very creepy.
Yeah, that is why I messaged you and was like, actually, no, I think this is Fred West, just because of the way he can contort his face.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that's definitely, he's trying to look a bit like Fred West.
Yeah.
And I was also like,
for the warden in the show, he was played by Roger Aaron Brown. He was in RoboCop 2, and he's been in several law enforcement shows. And the attorney, Sam Shapiro, was played by Michael B. Silver. Apparently, he was in Legally Blonde, but I haven't seen that film, so I don't recognise it.
You haven't seen Legally Blonde?
No. To be fair, you're more of the film buff. My thing has always been music, so very rarely do I have a film that I've watched. And I could probably name about 5 films on my hand that I genuinely love. But anyway, back to Michael B. Silver.
Oh yeah, him.
So along with Legally Blonde, he's appeared in several medical, emergency service, crime shows, and fun fact, he was in SWAT with the one and only Shamamo. That's it for notable guest stars. So, Emma, would you like to introduce our episode MVP?
Yes, okay. So now we always do this thing. It's where we name our baby girl or pretty boy of the episode because those are Morgan's terms of endearment. And yeah, I agree with Sarah. It should be Gideon. He was desperate to prove that Sarah Jean was innocent, but put his own feelings aside to honour her wishes and protect her son. Although I'll tell you, this was the one time I've ever been tempted to be like, maybe we give it to Sarah Jean. Maybe we give it to one of the UnSubs. Honestly, I was like, the woman went to death row to protect her son.
Yeah.
But
Gideon definitely deserved
I
it.
do think that Gideon was a good choice for this.
Bless him. Like, you could see the emotion, like, at the end. Like, he really wanted to save her, but she was like, no, just let me go.
It really was emotional, yeah.
It was.
We'll be right back with the True Crime Recap after this short break. So, welcome back to our True Crime Recap. Sarah, it's time to deliver the profile.
Thank you, Emma. So, for this week, while this true crime wasn't wholly linked to this week's episode, after quite a bit of research, it became apparent that the best fit was the case of Fred and Rose West, a notorious killer couple from the UK who were known to have committed at least 12 murders over a 20-year period between 1967 and 1987. And the murders only came to light in the mid-90s. So we know in the episode that the wife of the UnSub couple, Sarah Jean, we know she didn't commit any murders herself. But, as Emma's mentioned several times through this episode, the character of Jacob Dawes is too really similar to Fred West to not see the resemblance. So both in looks and the fact that both men were prolific, ebiphilic serial killers, and they tortured and killed young girls before burying them on their property. Frederick Walter Stephen West was born on the 29th of September 1941 in the village of Muchmarcle, which is in the county of Herefordshire in England. And he was born to poor farm workers Walter and Daisy West. His father was a disciplinarian and his mother was very overprotective, perhaps due to Fred being the first surviving child of the couple. Many siblings later followed. At school, Fred struggled greatly and ultimately left school in 1956 with no qualifications. He would later claim that he was sexually abused by his mother when he was 12, that he engaged in bestiality in his early teens, and that he believed incest was normal, as he often witnessed his father abusing his sisters. However, these claims were later dismissed as fantasy by his youngest brother Douglas. At the age of 17, he sustained a fractured skull and broken limbs in a motorcycle accident. This led him to develop fits of rage and a fear of hospitals. In 1960, Fred met his first wife, Catherine Costello, who went by the name of Rita. They dated briefly before going their separate ways when she moved back to Scotland. 2 years later, they became reacquainted and were soon married. At the time, Rena was already pregnant with another man's baby. Her daughter Charmaine was born in early 1963. However, as Charmaine was of mixed race, as her biological father was Pakistani, to explain this, the couple came up with the story that Rena had miscarried, and instead they adopted Charmaine. A year later, Rena became pregnant again, this time with Fred's child, and gave birth to daughter Anne-Marie the following year. In November of 1965, Fred accidentally ran over and killed a young boy in Glasgow, in Scotland. While he was cleared of any wrongdoing, the family feared reprisals from the locals, so they decided to move to Gloucester in England, along with their nanny, Issa McNeil, and her friend Anna McFall. By early 1966, Fred began exhibiting dominating, controlling behaviour to the women. Rena and Issa were the main targets, and he often encouraged Rena to turn to prostitution to support the family. Eventually, Rena became fed up with Fred's behaviour and returned to Scotland with Issa. She did plan to return to Scotland with her daughters, but Fred would not allow her. And infatuated with Fred, Anna, the friend of the nanny, offered to stay and become the children's nanny instead. So with Fred, Anna, and the two children, the family were living in a mobile home in Bishop's Cleeve, which is a large village just north of Cheltenham. A year later, 18-year-old Anna vanished. Up until 1969, Rena would live on and off with Fred and her daughters before once again relocating to Scotland. So, on to the other half of the Fred and West Brigade. Rosemary Pauline Letts was born on 29th of November in 1953 in Northam, Devon, to parents William Andrew Letts and Daisy Gwendolyn Fuller. She was the fifth of 7 children born into a poor family. At the time, her mother suffered greatly from clinical depression and was given electroconvulsive therapy, both during and immediately after her pregnancy. Anyway, we thought it was bad that her mum had mental health issues. Her father was a paranoid schizophrenic who was prone to extreme violence and reportedly sexually assaulted both Rose and her oldest sister, Patricia. During puberty, Rose would parade around the house naked in front of her younger brothers and would later molest them. And Emma, I hear you ask, when did Fred and Rose meet?
Oh, I didn't, but sure.
Well, it was in early 1969, where Fred met Rose at a bus stop in Cheltenham. At the time, Rose was 15. Fred was 27. So at first, initially, she was repulsed by his unkempt appearance and refused his advances, but soon became flattered by his attention when they repeatedly bumped into each other at the same bus stop. So once they officially began dating, Rose was a frequent visitor to Fred's mobile home, and Rose eventually became his children's nanny. Understandably, her parents were not happy with the relationship and reported the couple to the Gloucestershire Social Services, as Rose was still a minor at the time. As a result, Rose was placed in a home for troubled teenagers in August of 1969. But when she turned 16 a few months later, she left their home and moved into a flat in Cheltenham where Fred was now living. So the couple then moved to a ground floor flat in a 2-storey house at 25 Midland Road in Gloucester. In October of 1970, Rose gave birth to the couple's first daughter, Heather. A year later, while Fred was in prison for theft, Charmaine, who's Fred's stepdaughter, suddenly disappeared, and Rose claimed she'd gone to live with her mum, Rena, in Bristol. So in January of 1972, Fred and Rose were married, and another daughter, May, was born later that year. With the family expanding, the decision was made to move to a bigger property at nearby 25 Cromwell Street, later dubbed the House of Horrors. So over the next decade, Rose gave birth to more children. Stephen in 1973, Tara in 1977, Louise in 1978, Barry in 1980, Rosemary Jr. in 1982, and Luciana in 1983. Due to Rose often participating in prostitution, it's believed that not all of the children were fathered by Fred, but regardless, he considered them as his own. As parents, the couple were extremely abusive to the children, which led to many of the younger children being placed into the care of social services by the early 90s.
And I wish this was where the story ended, but it doesn't.
No. And here we have a list of all the victims of the couple over the 20 years period. So it began in 1967 in the July. Anne McFall, aged 18, who was the nanny of Fred's daughters with Rena, went missing while 8 months pregnant with Fred's baby. Her remains were found on June the 7th, 1994, in a field in the village where Fred had grown up. In the January of 1968, Mary Bastholm, aged 15, was a waitress at a cafe that Fred often frequented. She was abducted from a bus stop on Bristol Road in Gloucester. Fred confessed to raping and killing her later on, but he was never charged as no evidence was found, and neither was the body. In 1971, in the June, Charmaine West, aged 8, who was Fred's stepdaughter, was killed by Rose shortly before Fred was released from prison. Her remains were stored in the coal cellar before Fred buried her once he returned to the family home.
And at this point, I would just like to point out that Rose is 17.
Yeah.
She has been left to care for 2 minors, and she may have a baby at home. I don't know, at some point I blacked
Yeah, I think
out.
she had a baby like the year before that, yeah.
And she is 17 and she is murdering an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Just one. Because that was something shocking in the podcast that I listened to where I was like...
Yeah, it's just mental. 2 months later, Charmaine's mum, Rena, who was Fred's first wife, she was 27 at the time, and she was believed to have travelled to the West House in order to see her daughters or obtain custody of them. And it's believed that Fred likely killed her to avoid investigations into Charmaine's disappearance. And her remains were buried in the field near Fred's home village. In 1973, in the April, Linda Goff, aged 19, she'd been a lodger at 25 Cromwell Street, and she disappeared. Her mom visited the house after her disappearance to find that Rose was wearing her daughter's clothes. Rose told her that Linda had moved to Weston-super-Mare in Somerset to find work. Her body was buried under the garage, which was later converted into a ground floor bathroom. In November of that year, Carol Ann Cooper, aged 15, she'd been placed into care at a young age due to the death of her mother, and she was last seen alive by her boyfriend in the Worcester suburb of Warndon. She got on a bus to her grandmother's house. She was the final victim that was unearthed from the cellar in the mid-90s. In December of the same year, Lucy Partington, aged 21, was an Exeter uni student and the cousin of novelist Martin Ames. She was abducted from a bus stop on the A435 in Cheltenham, trying to get home to Bishop's Cleeve. Her body was also buried in the cellar at the west side. In 1974, Therese Siegenthaler, aged 21, was a Swiss sociology student at Greenwich Community College in London. She was abducted as she hitchhiked from South London to Holyhead in North Wales. Her family in Switzerland reported her missing to Scotland Yard when they lost contact with her. Fred concealed her remains by building a false chimney breast within the house. In November of the same year, Shirley Hubbard, aged 15, was a foster child who was abducted from a bus stop in Droitwich in Worcestershire as she travelled home from a date. Her remains were also buried in the cellar of the West House. In April of 1975, Juanita Mott, aged 18, had been a former lodger at 25 Cromwell Street, but at the time of her disappearance, she was living with a family friend in Newington, Gloucestershire. She's believed to have been abducted as she hitchhiked along the B4215 that runs between Newington and Gloucester. In May of 1978, Shirley Robinson, aged 18, was also a former lodger at 25 Cromwell Street. She reportedly engaged in casual sex with both Fred and Rose on a number of occasions. At the time of her disappearance, she was 8 months pregnant with Fred's baby. It's believed she was killed as the pregnancy threatened the stability of Rose and Fred's marriage. In August of 1979, Alison Chambers, aged 16, had been a foster child and a runaway, and she became acquainted with the West couple when she absconded from the children's home that she was living in. Fred would later pin her murder on Rose, saying that Rose had become too bloody vicious. Alison's body would later be found buried in the West Garden. As for the final victim, in 1987, Heather West, the couple's first daughter, and she was 16 at the time, she was expected to have been murdered as she tried to leave home after she had divulged information about the abuse at home to her classmates. Her remains were buried in the garden, and it was the 1994 investigation into her disappearance that led to the discovery of all the bodies at the house.
I'd just like to take a minute here
Yeah.
to point out that the majority of their victims were extremely vulnerable young women and sometimes children, often children, and no one really official when actually something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Like, just as one point, Charmaine, one of Charmaine's friends came to like knock on and be like, "Hi, can Charmaine come out to play?" and he witnessed some horrific abuse. Like, he is honestly just like pushed open the front door, and what he sees is horrific. I'm not going to describe it here, but it is not even the sort of thing that you would write off as, oh, it was the early 70s, you were allowed to hit your kids.
Yeah.
It was incredibly sexually sadistic. And he obviously told his parents, and I'm pretty sure his parents reported it, and it just went nowhere. There are so many occasions throughout this entire story where social services or the police or, hell, a vigilante should have stepped in and been like, absolutely not. You're not doing this ever again. And you know what? At this point, I don't care. Killed Fred West.
Yeah.
Hi, and welcome back to Looking for a Man in His 30s. In case you're thinking, wow, the sun must go behind the clouds really fast in England, this is the next day, and instead of it being 5 o'clock, it's like 11 o'clock at night. Basically, I'm not even sure if we had anything go wrong yesterday. It might have just been that
we just ran out of time, I think.
I honestly think it's that I kept veering off on Fred and Rose West to be like, can we just talk about something else for like 2 minutes, Sarah? Do you mind? I just need a fucking break. Yeah. So Sarah had something to do quite urgently at 5 o'clock, and then we should have recorded this earlier, but I had a different emergency. It's nothing serious wrong with me. I'm absolutely fine. Thank you for asking. And if you didn't care, then you could just skip forward 30 seconds while I talk. So yeah, I had something to do. So poor Sarah, she was like, okay, so can you record tomorrow evening? No, tomorrow afternoon. And I was like, no, I'm going to lunch. I can't. Okay, so you can record like at this time. Yes, but unfortunately, I've also found something else we're missing that I need to record. And also I need to go to a separate Zoom meeting at 9:45, you know, which I have only just literally finished in order to come back here at 11:10 to do the rest of Fred and Rose West before I go to bed.
Yeah.
At least I'm away this weekend. Yeah. For once, it's me going away, not Sarah. I know. You're surprised, aren't you? I am too. I'm going to drink some of my coffee. And Sarah, would you like to take us away with this?
Thanks, Emma. So, where were we up to? I know we're up to the 1990s. So, in May of 1992, the couple's daughter Louise, who was aged 13 at the time, was raped by Fred, which he then filmed. And Louise tells Rose about it, but Rose brushes it off, saying that she was asking for it. In the following week, she's raped a further 3 times, with Rose actually witnessing at least one occasion. So Louise confides in a friend about the sexual abuse going on at home, and the friend is extremely concerned and tells her mum about it. The mum then anonymously informs the police. Days later, the police go to the West house on the pretext of locating stolen property. At the house, they find homemade and commercial pornographic videos, but not the video of Louise's abuse. Whilst the police are at the house, many of the children mention about the ongoing abuse at home. And following medical exams, they are eventually removed from the home and placed into foster care. Concerned, the police begin a full-scale investigation, during which they question the couple about the daughter Heather's disappearance. Fred claimed that she was alive and well and supporting herself through prostitution, and then Rose backed up his claim.
Okay, did the police have a follow-up question about this? Like, all right, well, tell us where she is.
Well,
give us a phone number, an address. She's alive and well. Tell us where she is.
Anyway, we'll get back to that in a moment. But at this point, the pair were then arrested on counts of rape, buggery, child cruelty, and obstructing police. Rose was granted bail under the conditions that she had no contact with the children or Fred. Fred, however, was remanded in custody in Birmingham, but charges were eventually dropped when two of the children declined to testify in court.
And that's really awful because, of course, these children are too scared to testify in court.
Oh, yeah.
And so, to be clear, were the children still kept in foster care, or we don't know?
Yeah, they were still in care.
Okay, good.
And thankfully, the police continued to investigate Heather's disappearance. So while they were looking at Fred's history, the police discovered that Rena and Charmaine were also missing, and no missing persons report had ever been filed on either of them. At this point, investigators were convinced then that Heather was dead. And in previous interviews with the children had frequently made reference to Heather being buried under the patio. And this eventually prompted them to get a search warrant for the house at Cromwell Street. In February of 1994, bear in mind this is 2 years since the issue with Louise and stuff, the warrant was then granted and excavations on the garden began.
That's taken a long time.
Yeah, 2 years since they were arrested, charges were dropped. So I imagine them 2 years were just the police were doing the investigations through then. And it wasn't up until 94 that they could get the warrant. But
it's just one of those things where I'm like, someone should have intervened earlier.
Yeah.
100%. Someone should have intervened a lot earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
so, with the excavations going on in the garden and concerned by what he knew was going to be unearthed, Fred told officers he would give a full confession to Heather's murder. And once arrested, he revealed that he'd strangled her in a fit of rage, dismembered her body, and stored her remains in a dustbin while he waited for the opportunity to bury her remains. He was insistent that Rose knew nothing of the murder, and he would later tell police that they were looking in the wrong area of the garden and instead indicated to them the exact location. So, in custody, due to Fred's illiteracy and concerns about his understanding of what he'd actually done, he was appointed an appropriate adult to be present during police proceedings and assist with communication. And this appropriate adult was Janet Leach, a 38-year-old mother of 5 who was training to be a social worker. On February 26, 1994, police began excavating the area of the garden that Fred had indicated, and they unearthed Heather's remains, which were later identified via dental records. During the search, a thigh bone was found that didn't belong to Heather. This led to Fred confessing about other remains in the garden. 2 days later, 2 more bodies were discovered, and Fred was charged with a further 2 murders. As 3 bodies had now been found, the decision was made to search the entire property. Learning of this new search, Fred soon authorised his solicitor, Howard Ogden, to pass on a confession note to the leader of the murder investigation, who at the time was Superintendent John Bennett of the Gloucestershire Police. Dated March the 4th, the note read, I, Frederick West, authorise my solicitor, Howard Ogden, to advise Superintendent Bennett that I wish to admit a further, approximately, 9 killings. Expressly, Charmaine, Rena, Linda Goff, and others to be identified. Signed, F. West.
What does he mean approximately 9 killings?
I have no idea.
How do you not know how many murders you're about to confess to?
Unless you want to keep some secret. When questioned in regards to the note, Fred explained that 5 bodies were buried in the cellar and 1 was beneath the ground floor bathroom. He agreed to accompany police to the house to precisely indicate the locations of each victim. All 6 victims were discovered between the 5th and the 8th of March. Despite Fred claiming that Rose had no part in the murders, she was arrested on April the 20th, initially on the offences of raping an 11-year-old girl and assaulting an 8-year-old boy back in the mid-70s. Following questioning, she was charged with Linda Goff's murder, before being jointly charged with Fred for a further 5 counts of murder. On 30th of June 1994, the pair were brought before a magistrate's court. Fred was charged with 12 murders, Rose with 9. Both were remanded in custody, and during this court appearance, Rose refused to acknowledge Fred. When Rose later ignored his letters and messages from some of their children, Fred withdrew his earlier claim that Rose had no involvement and accused her of being culpable for the majority of the murders, excluding that of Anna McFall. While on remand awaiting trial, Fred was placed under strict suicide watch at HMP Birmingham due to increasing depression, which worsened when Rose refused communication. By the end of the year, the suicide watch had relaxed a little bit, but on January the 1st of 1995, Fred asphyxiated himself with an improvised rope made from a blanket and tags from the prison laundry bags. Following his death, Rose was left to face the charges alone. Her trial began at Winchester Crown Court on October the 3rd, 1995. Prosecutor Brian Leveson portrayed the couple as sex-obsessed sadistic murderers. Defense Richard Ferguson claimed that Rose was unaware of the extent of Fred's sadism and urged the jury to look past her promiscuity and dominating manner. The final witness at the trial was Janet Leach, Fred's appropriate adult. She relayed conversations that Fred had told her about there being a pact between Fred and Rose that he would take full responsibility for the murders in order to protect Rose and their children. She also relayed confessions about how he dismembered the victims and how Rose participated in the mutilation of Shirley Robinson by removing the unborn child from her womb after her death. The trial lasted 7 weeks, and by the end of November, the jury had returned unanimous guilty verdicts for the murders that she was linked to. Mr. Justice Mantell sentenced Rose to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Initially, she was incarcerated at HMP Bronzefield in Surrey. She was then later transferred to HMP Low Newton in County Durham. In 2019, she was transferred to HMP Newhall in West Yorkshire, where she remains to this day and continues to protest her innocence. So, in the aftermath of the trial and Fred's death, Fred's body was cremated in Coventry in March of 1995 in a funeral that lasted 5 minutes, and the only attendants were 4 of his children. His ashes are believed to have been scattered in the Welsh seaside resort of Berry Island, a place he visited often both in childhood and adulthood. Following Fred and Rose's arrests back in 1994, the 4 youngest West children were put in foster care and later given new identities. The remains of Charmaine and Rena were cremated together in Kettering. Surviving daughter Anne-Marie insisted that they share the same coffin. The West house at 25 Cromwell Street was completely demolished in October of 1996 to deter true crime fanatics from using the property as a shrine. The site was later developed into an alleyway.
And now we move on to What Would Penelope Garcia Do, which is the section of the podcast where we like to link people with resources or tell them about a cause that can help them or that needs their support. Maybe a charity needs donations, maybe there's a helpline, maybe there are petitions you can sign. The cause we've decided to highlight in this week's episode is about missing people, because a lot of the people in this case were missing persons that essentially were not checked up on. It could be that they were painted as runaways, they were foster kids, they were immigrants, and so they were especially vulnerable to Fred and Rose because they didn't have the kind of support right here in the UK where it would have been their parents constantly ringing police and being like, do you have an update into my daughter's disappearance? She disappeared then, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, do you want to take it away with the UK?
Yep, thank you. So, for the UK, the website I found was missingperson.org.uk, and it's the only UK charity in regards to this that provides a lifeline to those affected by a disappearance. The website has a Help Us Find section which shows photos, names and locations of people currently missing. Here you can download a poster or report a sighting of the missing person. There's also a message for the missing person and a number for them that they can call to talk to somebody. If you have any concerns about somebody missing, or you want to provide information if you've spotted somebody who's listed on the website, you can call or text 116 You can also email them at 116000@missingpeople.org.uk. There's also an online chat feature available which always allows people to chat in real time. This chat is open from 2:30 p.m. till 9:30 p.m. 7 days a week. As always, contact local police on 999 for immediate welfare concerns. To report someone missing, contact your local police on 101, and you do not have to wait 24 hours before contacting the police. Also, try and give police as much information as you can about the missing person in order to help them identify them. And Emma for the USA.
So, at any given time in the United States, up to 100,000 people may be reported missing, with as many as 600,000 reported annually. Many of these individuals are found alive and well, but some do sadly become long-term missing persons. As for this episode, I wanted to highlight the doenetwork.org. The Doe Network is a non-profit that assists investigative agencies with bringing closure to national and international cold cases concerning missing and unidentified persons. By providing exposure to the cases on the Doe Network website, providing credible matches between missing and unidentified persons to investigative agencies, and striving to get much needed and deserved media exposure to these cases. They receive and accept tips regarding cases featured on their site. All relevant information is forwarded to the local police or whoever is investigating this. They want to be clear that they are not private detectives, but they are there to publicize cases and collect information. They also are working with another podcast that I want to highlight. It's called The Missing Podcast, and that actually does a different episode on a missing person. I don't know if it's every week, but it might be. Either way, I'm going to also leave, along with all of the other resources, I'm actually going to leave a link to the Missing Podcast as well. I also wanted to highlight the work of Name Us, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, which is a national centralized center for missing, unidentified, and unclaimed person cases across the United States. This helps investigators match long-term missing persons with unidentified remains to resolve cases and bring resolution to families. So this is the way it works, is that if a body is found and it's unidentified, the coroner will list it under something like Jane Doe, which is where you get the website for the Doe Network. So the idea is that with Name Us, they will be able to match the profiles of long-term missing people with any remains found in order to bring closure to the families and help in that way.
That's all for this week. We'll come back next week when we'll be talking about Criminal Minds Season 1, Episode 15, Unfinished Business.
While you're waiting for the next episode, why not follow us on social media? We're on Instagram at Looking for a Man in His 30s Pod, Tumblr at Looking for a Man in His 30s Pod, or you can email us at lookingformanhinhis30s@gmail.com. I couldn't edit that to match the social handles. Absolute fail. All 3 times 30s is spelled out. Don't put 30 or you might get one of those bots that Instagram clearly thinks we are.
And you can also rate and review us on whichever platform you're using to listen to podcasts. It really helps more than you know.
Until next time.
This case is closed.